is shown at the bottom of page 19. And like I said, we are going to be calculating this number in the spreadsheet here in a second. But point is, earnings per share is equal to EAC divided by the number of common shares outstanding. Basically what it tells us is if the company did not retain any earnings and they paid out 100% of their after-tax profits in the form of dividends, this is how much each share would get. Now, no company is allowed to do that, but the point is, if you hear in the financial press about earnings estimates and so on, this is the earnings they're talking about, earnings per share. And so, since it is a profitability measure, we want that to be as large as possible. This other ratio, PE ratio, this isn't in the spreadsheet, but again, it's FYI. It's equal to the share price divided by earnings per share, and what it's meant to indicate is basically how expensive the stock is. So in the case of Dick's, you're actually paying $18.90 for each dollar of earnings based on this calculation. And it's unfortunate the board's not working here this morning, but basically the higher this is, the more expensive the stock is for a given dollar of earnings. And we would need to know what the industry number is to see if this is relatively expensive or not. It also depends on the market in general, because there's sometimes when the market just gets overheated and these PE ratios get driven up, and other times when the market's depressed, the PE ratios can tend to be lower. Okay, so anyway, I want to start out in the spreadsheet by calculating that number. This is going to go in C22. You'll notice there's already yellow formatting there, so this is a calculated number. So the calculation here is going to be G36 divided by C20. So G36 divided by C20 should turn out to be 259. And it is. And one of the things that I also realized that I needed to show you is where that number in the spreadsheet came from. And so we're going to need to, well, I'll do it. Presumably you have lecture note 5A someplace somewhat handy. But you are going to need this for your company as well, so I just want to make a note for Dick's where this came from. And it should be at the bottom of the income statement. Now, for most companies, this is the way the bottom of their income statement is going to look. It's going to go through sales, subtracting out the cost, interest expense, provision for taxes, etc. And that brings us to this net income number that we're using in the numerator. And then down here, it's going to show the weighted average common shares outstanding. And so 111,095 is the number of shares outstanding that we just used in the spreadsheet. So that's this number here, and that's where it came from. And then it shows the actual calculation of earnings per share. And that's the 259 that we just calculated. So it's really easy to verify, and that is going to be something in your project spreadsheet that I'm going to check because it's very easy to check. Okay, so any questions about that? All right. Now, in the spreadsheet, and I'm going to put this on the board here in a second, or in a few minutes actually, it's not the first thing I'm going to put on the board, but I'm going to talk about the color coding. And what I'll just say is that, again, the purple cells are dollar amounts that you enter. The red cells are equations that once you filled in the purple cells, the red cell is going to calculate the total for you. And that's all based on your company data. The common size ratios, as you saw Wednesday, we calculated all of those. So once these numbers are changed, these numbers will automatically recalculate themselves. The industry numbers are going to come from your company's RMA report, and you're going to have to enter those numbers. Now, there are a couple of the industry numbers that appear in a couple of different places, or they need to be calculated. So I want to point these out to you. In the comparison of Dick's to its industry, what I told you was that the debt ratio for the industry is not directly available. It needs to be calculated using the equity ratio. This is the equity ratio. And the way we calculated it in the notes was we took 100%, subtracted this from it, and that gave us this number. So you'll notice that the formatting on this number is a little bit different, and that's to remind you that you don't need to do anything with this. So type a little note next to yourself, next to the cell, a note to yourself next to the cell. Don't change. Now, you do need to change this one, and this is why it's green and yellow instead of yellow and green. But again, once you change this, this will automatically update. All right, there are a couple of other cells that are like that. And actually, I guess I should make the formatting the same, shouldn't I? Let's do that. Let's start with the cursor on J12 and use the format painter, the little paintbrush up in the upper left-hand corner here. And we're going to paint I-44. And there are two more cells we're going to do the same thing with, and they're going to be these two. It's not going to change the number, it just changes the format. I-44. We use the format painter to copy the format in J12 down to I-44. Okay, now, starting with your cursor on I-44, we're going to do the format painter again. And we're going to highlight I-47 and 48. Now, what you need to do on I-47, you're going to put a cell reference to I-32. So I-47, type in it, equals I-32. And the number's not going to change, it's just a cell reference. All right, then, in I-48, you may already have a cell reference. It's supposed to be equals I-34. And then we're going to go up to where we type don't change in K12. And we're going to copy that next to, well, we're going to copy it into J44. And if you do Control V instead of Enter, it'll stay highlighted. And then we want to do the same thing in J47 and 48, and now hit Enter. And now I would suggest a group save. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the M. Poirier timeline, and we're going to leave that where it is for the moment. Okay, so here's the extra credit project outline. And I'm going to start with a new pen.